Good afternoon and welcome to Bull Market Stock Show. This is your host Rian Hobson, and we're doing actually quite a few things today. It's quite a big market for the FX traders for today. It's a big day of trading. We have one this morning of the Reserve Bank of Australia. There's another one coming. There's actually two coming later in the day. But before I go on, please subscribe to my YouTube page, and please send your comments so that I can answer it actually via the podcast. Everything is live, so please send your comments. I will try and answer it. So for today, we are doing actually the one that will be later on, I think at 4 o'clock, that will be the Bank of Canada. Now, there's a big possibility that the Bank of Canada may actually talking about more tapering or maybe of a rate increase later today, and that could actually push the Canadian dollar actually much further if that happens. Now, this comes from off the back of quite a strong employment number last Friday, and on top of that, a high oil price. Now, high oil price also feeds into the Canadian economy, as we know that Canada is actually a large exporter of oil. So those two things are actually playing in, and also there is quite aggressive domestic spending that's going on in Canada. So those factors that came in there, that actually, for me, it's actually a good point where actually the Bank of Canada can talk about more tapering, or actually maybe say they're going to increase actually interest rates. Now, on the flip side, the unemployment rate is still a bit high. It's still not at pre-COVID levels, but it is actually a very good sign for the Canadian dollar to taper. So personally, I think maybe the Canadians may actually, or the Central Bank of Canada may actually talking about more tapering, and that could actually lift up the Canadian dollar. So please watch that one out closely. There is surely people that will jump in before the interest rate decision and maybe catch the whole wave. Now, this comes on the back of what happened this morning with New Zealand. Now, the interest rates of New Zealand, it didn't go up today, but they were extremely hawkish this morning. One, they actually gonna hold all the stimulus from the central bank. They're gonna hold it, so they're stopping it. That comes now in effect on the 23rd of July this year. Now, there is also now a big speculation that the Reserve Bank of New Zealand may actually go with an interest rate hike of about 50 basis points, because the economy is actually doing very well. And then one specific area is that the housing market in Australia is New Zealand is actually overheating, also coming from the back of good employment numbers. And there's also a shortage of labor, which they actually highlighted in their comment. Now, just to have a look on the comment from the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, or the statement of the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, I will just actually show you this. There we go. All right. Now, this is the policy statement, monetary policy statement of New Zealand. They state here in the monetary policy, the Monetary Policy Committee agreed to reduce the current stimulatory level of monetary setting in order to meet its consumer price and employment objectives over the medium term. The Reserve Bank will hold the additional asset purchase under a large-scale asset purchase program by the 23rd of July 2021. The committee will keep the official cash rate at 0.25% and the funding for the lending program unchanged. That actually changed the whole entire story for the New Zealand dollar this morning, and the currency popped up with about 30 pips this morning. And I think the New Zealand dollar still have legs to go, and it can actually go actually be much stronger for today. Now, that first part there of the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, that was the whole point where the currency started to jump, and then it goes further. The committee agreed that in the absence of further significance, the economy a shock or more persistent consumer price inflation pressure is expected to build over the time due to a rise of domestic capacity pressure and growing labor shortages. So as I explained with the labor shortage, so there is actually a labor shortage that goes on in New Zealand. So it goes on. However, the committee noted that uncertainties remain as the pace and the magnitude of any pass-through of costs onto the medium-term inflation, especially given the report of the labor modest wage growth and well-anchored inflation expectations. So those comments were actually very hawkish, and that actually pushed up the New Zealand dollar higher this morning. And as I said, it looks for me that New Zealand dollar will actually go further. So that all depends maybe later on when it comes to the other news where Jerome Powell will talk later on. But for now, it looks for me that the New Zealand dollar is actually set to go actually much further of where it is due to those comments. So the one currency that I did say that will be hot property is definitely the New Zealand dollar. Now, also later in the day, there's the US producer price index that come out and the oil inventories. So please be on the lookout for that one. For those of you who don't understand the oil inventories, if it's actually, I think it was forecast on negative 4.3 million barrels. If that number is larger, for example, far larger in the negative territory, maybe 8 million or 6 million, then definitely that will push up the oil prices. Then it means there is actually not much a drawdown basically in oil inventories in the United States, and that will push up the oil price. So please be on the lookout for that one, because that one can affect Canada in this regard when it comes to the oil inventories. And it's very close. The release is at 4 o'clock and the other one is at 4:30. Then we get to the last point, which is the big elephant in the room later on, which will be the Federal Reserve Chair that will testify. Now, this comes from the back of actually a overheat inflation number yesterday. Now, yesterday's inflation number was extremely hawkish. Later on in the day, last night, the dollar actually climbed, and that comes now with a high inflation number. And now it looks highly possible that the Federal Reserve will start to taper sooner than later. Now, the comments, there may be comments tonight at 6 o'clock where the Federal Reserve the Federal Reserve Chair will say, okay, he needs to do something with the high inflation, maybe lift up, maybe stop the tapering, maybe start to taper, and maybe look at interest rates, raising interest rates early. Or he could be dovish also by saying there's still a lot of slack in the economy, and that could, a high possibility that the dollar will go down. But if it's hawkish tonight at 6, then definitely that will give some momentum for the US dollar. And obviously, then you look at the commodities that will go down and maybe some indices that will also go down. So it's quite a day today, especially starting here from 2:30, 4 o'clock, you have Canada. And I think on my personal opinion, that the Canadians may look at tapering more because of all the factors that I did mention earlier. And also maybe Jerome Powell will look at tapering, then the whole thing will reverse. So please be cautious for today, because you have 4, you have the Bank of Canada, and at 6, you have the Federal Reserve. So we might see a hawkish Canadian Bank of Canada, and we might see a hawkish Federal Reserve at 6 o'clock. So that is it from my side. All the best with trading for today. It will be a bumpy day, but please wait for the news rather, and then you place your trade. So that is it from my side. I will see you guys tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Have a lovely day.